A 19-year-old is German border guard named Konrad Schumann. He's standing at a section of the border where the wall is still just a single coil of wire. For more than an hour, he watches Schumann pace back and forth like a man trying to wear out a decision with his feet. He drops his cigarette on the ground. He takes a running start. The night of August 12th of 1961, an entire city went to sleep normal. By morning, families were separated, streets were cut in half, and the government had built a wall overnight to keep its own people from leaving. Welcome to history. Never mind. Welcome to Very Human History. Yes, we have a new name, right, Zaida?
Yes.
In this show, you're gonna find human lessons inside the history biggest moments. My name is Sergio.
And I'm Saida.
And if you can notice, my voice is not the best today.
We're a little bit sick. Actually,
Yes,
the whole house is sick right now.
the whole house is sick. So if you're here, hit the subscribe button and come back every week. So now let's dig into it. Let's try to get started. You know, sweetie, this story brought me into this phase of my life. Do you remember when I had this particular job that it was stressing me out a lot? This job I loved because it meant that I finally left working at the factory. I remember thinking in those early months, this is it. This is the place I could spend the rest of my career. And I felt respected, I felt trusted, and I was all in. And then something started shifting about the job, as it usually does. Not the work was fine, and not the people around me. Everything else was still great, but the problem was my boss. Little by little, something changed in him. Paranoia started creeping in. He would make comments about things going missing, about information getting out, and the way that the comments landed, they weren't looking for answers, they were just looking at people. And specifically me, because I was the only person in the
Really?
office.
The outcast.
Yes, and I remember the first time. Yes, I'm talking about counting the cash and putting it in a safe, locking it up, routine stuff. But after that day, I started recording myself because I didn't know, well, if the money disappears, I'm gonna be the one to blame. So every bill that I counted, every time that I put money in the safe, I make sure that I was recording myself counting the money.
I seen those videos. You know, we have the share
Yeah,
pictures. I was come across, I'm
yes.
like, what is this?
Yes, and I never done anything like this in my life. It was difficult because at some point someone hacked the computers or something, and they were running a scam, like sending fake checks to different states. Some of the innuendos that were made and comments, it was in reference to me. At that moment, I decided to record my phone calls as well. I was not a criminal. I have not stolen anything, but I was living like I was someone about to be accused of something that I didn't do. And I was going to bed at night thinking of those scenarios of what am I going to be blamed for the next time. And at this point, I was dreading the next 8 hours and waking up, and I just didn't want to go to work. But in a way, sweetie, at the moment before I told you all this, I felt trapped. I wanted to support my family. I couldn't just walk out. So I stayed for a little longer than I should have. And every day that I stayed, the place that used to feel like home, that looking forward to go to work, it didn't feel like that anymore. I felt like the walls were closing in. I just didn't know what to do. And I was wondering if you've ever been in a position like this yourself.
Well, for me, I think it was when I started. No, not when I started. When I was working at the laundromat.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how episodes before I had told you guys about the stalker that I had? This job was kind of that job for me, like it was for you.
Mm-hmm.
This job, the owners were amazing. Like this was one of the first jobs that I have had where they treat me like if I was like their granddaughter because they were a little bit older, the
Mm-hmm.
owners, and they treated me like if I was their granddaughter. They trusted me, they liked me, they helped me get through college. With my hours, with my pay. The pay wasn't that bad, and it was kind of like I had already gained their trust. I had already gained, we could set a friendship even. It was a really cool job. I liked it. But once this whole situation started, it became the job that I did not want it to be in, the job that I was so desperate to leave. And
Mm.
sadly, anywhere I looked, I couldn't find a replacement for it. And I needed to stay because I needed to pay my bills. So this situation went on for a year. And it was, oh my God, the most tiring, the most scary year of my life because I didn't want to go to work because the guy already knew my hours. So it was stressful and I couldn't leave it because I wasn't finding another job or no one was calling me from the jobs that I was applying to. And I couldn't just leave that job and not pay my bills. So for me, it was difficult going to work and also leave it at the same time.
Have you ever felt like you wanted to leave something but couldn't? Not because you were lazy, not because you were afraid of hard work, but because leaving meant something about who you are, what you are responsible for, who's depending on you. For me, it was my family. I am a husband. I am a provider. That's not just a role for me. That's how I think about myself as a man. And I have never quit a job before in my life, not once. So I stayed. And every day I stayed, I had to ask myself, who am I if I cannot hold this together? That is a suffocating feeling when someone else's paranoia starts making you question yourself. When you're doing everything right and more, and you still have to justify every single thing you do. When the comments and the jokes start making you feel like you're failing at something you know you're not failing at. Maybe you know that feeling from a different place. A relationship where you kept giving everything and kept having to prove yourself anyway. A home where nothing you did was ever quite right. A situation where you felt trapped, not by a locked door, but by everything you'd lose if you walked through it. In 1961, 3 million people knew that feeling. They were living in a country that was squeezing them. They couldn't give them a reason to stay. They could only make living harder and harder until one night it made living impossible. To understand the Berlin Wall, you have to go back 17 years before it goes up. May 1945. World War II is over in Europe. Germany is in ruins. 60 million people are dead across the continent. The four countries that defeated Nazi Germany, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, have to figure out what to do with what is left. They make a decision. They divide Germany into four zones, one for each of them to administer. The Americans take the south, the British take the northwest, the French take the southwest, the Soviet Union takes the east. And they agree that Germany's capital city, Berlin, will be split the same way, with each power controlling one sector of the city. There is one problem with this plan, though. Berlin is not at the center of Germany. It is deep inside the Soviet zone, more than 100 miles from the nearest West controlled territory, which means that West Berlin, the American, British, and French sectors of the city, sit like an island in the middle of communist controlled East Germany. From the beginning, this arrangement is fragile. The wartime alliance between the Western powers and the Soviet Union does not survive the war. By 1947, they are no longer allies, they are rivals. The Cold War has begun, and Berlin, sitting where it sits, becomes the most dangerous point of friction on Earth. In 1948, the Soviet Union tries to solve the Berlin problem by force. They close all road and rail access into West Berlin, cutting the city off from supplies, from food, from fuel. Their calculation is that Western powers will abandon the city rather than risk a confrontation. They are wrong. The United States and Britain respond with an airlift, flying supplies into West Berlin around the clock for 11 months. Over 200,000 flights, more than 2 million tons of food and coal are delivered by air to keep the entire city alive. The Soviets eventually back down. The blockade ends. West Berlin stays free. But the deeper problem does not go away. West Berlin is still an island and is the only place in the entire Eastern Bloc where the line between East and West is not a heavily fortified border. It is a city street. You could live in East Berlin and walk to West Berlin. You could take a subway train from one side to the other. You could cross between two different worlds just by changing neighborhoods, and people do. Between 1949 and 1961, almost 3 million people leave East Germany for the West, not in secret operations or dramatic escapes, just walking through Berlin, taking the train, crossing the street, and not coming back. Doctors, engineers, teachers, architects, the people East Germany needs most. Young people in their 20s and 30s who look at what the life under Soviet control offers them and decide it is not enough. The East German government can build factories and write 5-year plans. What it cannot build is a reason to stay. By 1961, the situation is critical. In June alone, 19,000 people leave. In July, 30,000 more. In the first 12 days of August, 16,000 cross into West Berlin. On August 12th, a Saturday, 2,400 people leave, the largest single-day number ever recorded. East Germany is not losing a population, it is losing a country. The leader of East Germany, Walter Ulbricht, has been pushing the Soviet Union for permission to seal the border for years. The Soviets are nervous about how the West will react. But by the summer of 1961, there is no other option. If East Germany keeps losing people at this rate, it will collapse from the inside. On June 15, 1961, just 8 weeks before the wall goes up, a reporter at an international press conference asked Ulbricht directly, "Is the government planning on building a wall at the city boundary?" Ulbricht looks into the camera and says, "Nobody has any intention of building a wall." It is the first time anyone in public has used the word wall in connection with Berlin. On Saturday, August 12, 1961, the leaders of East Germany attend a garden party at a government guest house outside Berlin. At midnight, Walter Ulbricht signs the order. By 2 a.m., East German soldiers and workers are already in the streets. They are tearing up the roads that cross between two halves of the city. They are unrolling coils of barbed wire along a line that runs 27 miles through the middle of Berlin, down the center of streets, through parks and neighborhoods, along riverbanks, against the side of buildings. Subway lines are cut. Phone connections between east and west are severed. Checkpoints are closed. The city wakes up divided. A woman on Bernhardstrasse opened her window and realizes her apartment building is in East Berlin, but the sidewalk below her is in West Berlin. A few days later, East German workers come to break up all the windows that face the street. She lowers herself out of her window before they finish and drop into the arms of people waiting on the sidewalk below. A man tries to cross to his sister's apartment on the other side of the street, where he had dinner the night before. The wire is up. Guards are watching. He cannot cross. Children wake up separated from one parent. Husbands and wives who happen to sleep on different sides of the city the night before cannot reach each other. People stand at the wire and look at the other half of the city they lived in yesterday. West Berlin watches in shock. West Germany protests. The United States condemns it publicly, but privately, President Kennedy looks at the alternative. A direct military confrontation between American and Soviet forces in the middle of Europe, two nuclear powers, inches apart, and he makes a calculation. He says it plainly to an aide. A wall is a hell of a lot better than a war. The wall stays. The people on the wrong side of it stays with it. The wire is up. In the days that follow, the wire becomes concrete. The East German government built a proper wall, eventually 12 feet high, reinforced, topped with a smooth pipe so you cannot get a grip on it. Behind the wall, they built a second wall, and between the two walls, they created what the guards called the death strip, a stretch of open ground, flood-lit at night, raked every morning so that footprints show up clearly, patrolled by guards with a shoot-to-kill order. Along the wall, they have installed 302 watchtowers, 20 bunkers, and 259 dog runs. They spent 28 years making it better at the one thing it was designed to do. 3 days after the wire goes up, A 19-year-old East German border guard named Konrad Schumann is posted to a corner in the Bernardstrasse neighborhood. He grew up in Saxony. He trained as a shepherd before deciding he could earn more money as a police officer. He enlisted, worked hard, showed up on time, did what he was told. He volunteered for service in Berlin that summer because he was considered reliable. On August 15, 1961, he's standing at a section of the border where the wall is still just a single coil of wire, long enough to jump if he moved fast enough. On the West Berlin side, a crowd has gathered. Some are watching. Some are calling out, "Come over." A photographer named Peter Lieblin is standing on the West Berlin side, watching. For more than an hour, he watches Schumann pace back and forth along his short stretch of the wire. Schumann is smoking, one cigarette after another. He's not making eye contact with the crowd. He just keeps walking in the same short distance back and forth, like a man trying to wear out a decision with his feet. On the West Berlin side, a police van pulls up and parks nearby. Its back doors are open. Nobody says anything about it. Everyone watching understands what it is there for. Schumann is pacing. Earlier that day, he had watched something. A little girl. She had come to visit her grandmother in East Berlin, and now she cannot get back to her parents in West Berlin. The guards will not let her cross. Her parents are standing a few meters away on the other side of the wire, and they cannot reach her. The guards send the girl back into East Berlin. Schumann is one of those guards. He keeps pacing. Then he stops. He drops his cigarette on the ground. He reaches down and presses the top of the wire coil slightly with his hand. He takes a running start. He jumps. Peter Lieblin clicks the shutter at exactly the right moment. The photograph that comes out of that camera is called Leap into Freedom. It runs in newspapers around the world the next day. It shows a 19-year-old in a military uniform clearing a coil of barbed wire in midair. He's already past the point of no return. He lands on the West Berlin side. A police officer grabs him and pulls him toward the van. The door closes. The van drives away. The whole thing takes about 4 seconds. What happens to Konrad Schumann after those 4 seconds is not what most people know, and it matters. He is granted asylum in West Germany. He settles in Bavaria. He gets a job at an auto factory, marries, builds a life. From the outside, it looks like the story ends well. The man who jumped the wall makes it to the other side. Simple. But Schumann lives for decades with the fear that East German agents are watching him. He does not go back to Saxony to visit his parents and siblings for years, afraid of what the crossing would mean, afraid of what his former colleagues think of him. Some of his family call him a traitor and refuse to speak to him. The photograph of his leap is famous across the world. The man in the photograph cannot find peace. In 1989, 28 years after his jump, the wall falls. Germany reunifies. Schumann finally goes back to Saxony. Some of his family welcomes him. Some still will not. In an interview after reunification, he says something that stays with you. Only since November 9th, 1989, have I felt truly free. He jumped in 1961. He waited 28 years to feel peace after crossing. On June 20th, 1998, 9 years after the wall falls, 37 years after his leap, Konrad Schumann walks out of the orchard on his property in Bavaria and takes his own life. His wife finds him a few hours later. He leaves no note. He is 56 years old. His photograph is inducted into the UNESCO Memory of the War Program in 2011. It is considered one of the most important photographs of the 20th century. The man in the photograph jumped. That part is permanent, but the jump cost him. That is also part of the story. The wall does what it is built to do. The mass exodus stops almost immediately. The people who were leaving every day cannot leave anymore. But not everyone accepts that. In the summer of 1962, a group of students in West Berlin spent weeks digging a tunnel under the wall by hand. 140 feet through the dirt, starting from a basement, working in shifts with shovels and buckets, hauling the dirt out in small loads so no one notices. On the night of September 14th, 1962, the tunnel opened on the East Berlin side. 29 people crawl through it to the west in a single night. Families, children, people who have been waiting for a way out since 1961. In 1979, two families spent 2 years secretly building a hot air balloon from fabric scraps, a homemade gas burner, and rope. They never tell another person what they're building. On the night of September 16, 8 people, 4 adults and 4 children, climb into a basket and lift off from a field in East Germany. The balloon rises into the dark, crosses the wall, and comes down in West Germany. Both families make it. Over 28 years, more than 5,000 people get across. They hide in engine compartments and car trunks. They build tunnels. They swim rivers. They hang from the underside of trucks. They fly. At least 140 people die trying. The most known is Peter Fetcher, 18-year-old, shot while trying to cross in August of 1962. Just 1 year after the wall goes up, he makes it to the wall but falls back on the East Berlin side. He is still alive. He calls for help. The crowd on the West Berlin side can hear him but cannot reach him. The East German guards will not retrieve him. He dies. He lies at the base of the wall for nearly an hour. Then he stops calling out. His death is photographed. It runs in papers around the world. The East German government calls the wall an anti-fascist protection rampart. They say it is protecting their people from dangerous outside influences. No government in history has ever built a wall to keep people in and call it protection. By the fall of 1989, East Germany is shaken. The wall has held for 28 years. But something is happening the government cannot stop. Every Monday, people across East Germany gather in the street. Peaceful protests growing larger every week. In Leipzig, in Dresden, in East Berlin itself. Hundreds of thousands of people holding candles, marching without weapons, calling for freedom of movement, freedom of speech, the right to live without being watched. The old leadership collapses. The new leadership is trying to release pressure without actually opening the country. They draft a new travel regulation, a limited thing really, that would allow East Germans to apply for permission to visit the West. It is meant to take effect the following morning. Applications, forms, a control process, not an open gate. On the evening of November 9th, 1989, a Communist Party officially named Gunter Schabowski walks into the press conference at the International Press Center in East Berlin. He is the regime's spokesman. He has spent the day in meetings and was not present when the new travel regulation was discussed and finalized. Just before walking into the press conference, a colleague hands him a copy of the document. He has not read it carefully yet. The press conference runs for an hour. Near the end, Schabowski pulls out a paper and reads the new travel regulations out loud in a flat, bureaucratic voice. He does not seem to fully understand what he's reading. Then a reporter raises his hand. "When does it take effect?" he asks. Schabowski shuffles his papers. He looks at the document. He pauses for a few seconds. Then he looks up and says, "As far as I know, effective immediately, without delay." The press conference ends. Schabowski does a television interview and goes home for the night. He has no idea what those 3 words are about to do. West German television broadcasts the announcement during its 8 p.m. evening news, which most of East Germany watches because it comes in clearly. People across East Berlin hears the words. They call each other. They cannot believe it. Then they stop calling each other and start moving. Thousands of East Berliners make their way to checkpoints. They arrive in small groups, then in larger groups, then in crowds too big to count. The border guards have received no new orders. They call up the chain of command. Nobody knows what to tell them. Nobody is willing to give an order to fire on the crowd. The people keep arriving. A Stasi officer named Holger Jaeger looks at the thousands of people pressing against the gate. He has no authorization. He has no order. He makes a decision. He opens the gate. People pour through from both directions. East Berliners into the west, West Berliners crossing into the east, strangers embracing each other in the street that have not been able to share for 28 years. By morning, people are on top of the wall, not armies or ceremonies, ordinary people climbing up to a 12-foot concrete structure that has defined the shape of their entire lives and standing on top of it. The wall that goes up in the night, in secret, under armed guard, while a city sleeps, comes down in public, by hand in pieces, carried away by the people it was built to contain. Okay, sweetie, so you heard this story. How awesome this was. I love this story. It was a bit sad in parts, but tell me, what do you think is the most fascinating thing about the story to you? The most interesting part to you?
What really caught my attention, it was the way people were trying to escape. Now, I learned this in school. Like you took the Berlin Wall. I remember my teacher dancing, trying to teach us about the Berlin Wall. But this part I did not know. Like the way people were trying, of the many ways people were trying to escape.
Hmm.
It was kind of like wow. And the one that caught my attention, it was one with the hot air balloon.
I know,
So
right?
it was
That was
like
so. I wonder if these people were like engineers or scientists that they came up with something
I
like
mean,
that.
they must have been, I guess, desperate enough to know a way out.
Mm.
So it caught my attention. So I started like researching if there was anything else about it. And I found out that when it happened, it was on September 1979. That was when they were able to get out. But before that, that was their second attempt. Try to get out the first time in early July. But the reason why they couldn't escape was because of the moisture outside. The balloon wasn't able to get all the way to cross to the wall.
Hmm.
So the balloon fell before they got to the wall, and they had to pretty much leave the pieces behind and
Oh
kind of just
my
retreat to
God.
where they were from. So the Stasi found the pieces of the balloon and they started researching. So
Hmm.
it turns out that by the time they found out who they were, they had already crossed to the other side.
Oh, that's perfect. That's
But
great.
they started harassing their families for it.
Man.
Yes.
What I find fascinating about the story is the relationship between the US and the Soviet Union. They are like a few decades prior, they have a common cause in a way
Hmm.
because they're defeating the Nazi Germany and all this stuff. But what I find so amazing is that how the world really changed in just a few decades. This story about the Berlin Wall really showcases the reality of the world. Sometimes we ask, but why can't we just get along? And I get
That's
it.
my question all the time.
And and in a way, it just sounds a little bit unrealistic because it assumes that everybody is on a playground and everybody thinks the same way, they get along with the same rules, but that's not really the case. And we need to assume that people don't have our own values. And you have the US, you have France, you have Britain against East Germany and the Soviet Union. And the reason is they both want to preserve their ideology. One ideology is competing against the other. I think it's important to understand that if you zoom out, you realize that other nations have different interests than yours, and in some cases, against your own interest. And if you have people that are communist or you have nations that are communist around you, that will affect you in the end as a nation. What I find crazy is just people going to sleep one day and then waking up divided, families, children separated from their parents, like brothers again. It's just spouses just happen to be divided. And what, 28 years without seeing each other? That's crazy. What's your first reaction when you hear something like this?
To be honest, when I first learned about this, it was in school. And I always thought like why they didn't just cross when it was being built. That was that has been my
Right.
first thought. It's like, okay, you seen this is happening. Start running. Like if they're building, run. But then it made me think about myself. If I see someone build it something down the street. In my head, I'm not saying, "Oh, they're containing us. Let
Mhm.
us leave." I'm just gonna be like, "Oh, the city's doing something."
But
But here,
remember, it also happened at 2 a.m. That's the part too.
but still, like you hear the rumbling outside. You don't actually think about that they're trying to contain you. You're
Yes,
thinking, I was like, "Oh, they're doing something." At least that's what I would think. I wouldn't think that they're containing us. She woke up. Give
yes.
us a second.
Our daughter woke up, guys. She's rubbing her eyes and coming in looking for mama. We're gonna take a pause. And we are back, guys. That's what happens, it is. What I think about is the soldiers that had to follow orders, the families they entrapped. What are they thinking? Are they thinking about maybe this is my time to leave, or this is wrong? Do they want to revolt? Are they talking to each other? And this is a big deal because a soldier can just do whatever they want. If they don't follow orders, they get severe consequences, disciplinary actions, they get stripped of their ranks. It is hard to just leave it behind or to go to prison because of it. It's an incredible story. I think about these soldiers, but I also think about Schumann, the guy who ended up crossing over and the picture about him was snapped.
Like, I think he's just kind of making his mind, should I stay or should I go?
Like the
Like,
song.
yeah,
Stranger Things.
should I stay or should I go? Like, if I stay, probably he thought that what he was doing wasn't correct.
Yes, I
If
think so.
I go,
He's
I would be like,
outweighing the
yes.
consequences, especially knowing what would happen. He believed that I think he's having a real battle in his mind. He's going back and forth. And he's like, what about the family that I'm leaving behind? Will I stay? Will I be free if I go cross over? Or will I live well enough if I stay? So everybody's feeling trapped inside or at least a lot of people are feeling trapped inside of East Berlin. And Schumann jumps in 1961, but he says he doesn't feel free until 1989. Have you ever made a decision that was supposed to free you and you had to actually wait to feel that
Yeah.
you were free?
Yes. No, yeah, yes. Yes, now that I think about it, yes. You remember the story that I told you guys earlier, and actually, I think the episode prior about the stalker?
Yes.
Well, afterwards, after I found a new job, after the whole year of terror for me, then for a while, for those few months, I did not feel at peace. I still had like that PTSD, like of going out. Like, what if I found him? Because let me tell you, like, this guy was mentally ill, but he knew how to drive a car. So it was kind of like, what if I see him? What if he recognized me? What if? And for a while after I left the job, I would say like about like, 2 to 3 months, my peace finally started to come back because I was out of the job. No one was telling me, oh, he came looking for you. Oh, no one was calling the phone asking for me. Not seeing these things, not hearing about these things make my peace come back.
I told you in the beginning about the job I loved, about recording myself counting the money, about going to bed at night running through scenarios, about staying because I didn't know who I was if I walked away without a job. I went home one night and I sat down with Zaida, my wife, and I told her everything, the recordings, the phone calls, how I felt, the way I was feeling about myself. The question I couldn't stop asking, who am I if I cannot hold this job? She didn't fix it. She didn't give me a plan. She just looked at me and told me to quit. And something happened in that moment that I didn't expect. I felt relieved, not because the problem was solved. I still had a family to provide for, bills to pay, all of it, but because I had been carrying this armor for months. This image of myself as the guy who doesn't quit, who holds it together, who figures it out. And she just took it off me. She saw me as a human being, not a provider. Not a man who had to have an answer, just me. We had a safety net in place. We had planned for something like this. She reminded me he was there. The next morning, I went in. I thanked my boss for the opportunity and I quit. Same day, done. And I thought about Schumann a lot, working on this episode. He stood at the wire for an hour, pacing, smoking. He already knew what he wanted. He had probably known for a while. What took that hour wasn't the decision, it was finding the courage to do it, to believe that what was waiting on the other side was worth what he was leaving behind. I carried my version of that. for months. Maybe you are in that hour right now. Maybe you've already decided about a job, a situation, a relationship, and you're still pacing, still looking at that wall. Whatever wall you have been staring at for so long, it had started to feel like a landscape. It is not permanent. It is only as strong as your belief that it has to stay. You've been pacing long enough. Go break through the wall. On August 13th, 1961, a city went to sleep whole and woke up divided. For 28 years, families lived on opposite sides of a wall they did not ask for. People tunneled under it, flew over it, and died trying crossing it. A 19-year-old guard paced at a coiled wire for an hour and jumped. And on November 9th, 1989, a bureaucrat read the wrong memo at a press conference and accidentally set a city free. The wall stood for 28 years. It came down in one night.
If you guys really love these stories, please follow us for more. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media you guys are in, and listen to us or anywhere you listen to your podcast.